I had a pretty bad boogie boarding accident and incurred and I think you've had experience with injury as well, my fourth
Mhm.
concussion, a traumatic brain injury that really pulled me out of my game completely, that benched me. And I lost my cognitive capacity, my capacity for movement, and it was a real, dark night of the soul moment when my neurologist said to me, "This is your new normal, accept it." It was a complete loss of my identity, actually.
Mhm.
I had really attached my identity to this kind of high-flying leadership role that I had and,
Mhm.
having my impact in the world through my work. And that
Mhm.
was stripped away from me. Who was I without my cognitive capacity, without my, kind of high-flying leadership role?
Mhm.
Welcome to the Conscious Leadership Revolution podcast, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so we can change the way the game is being played.
Welcome to the Conscious Leadership Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Susan Hobson, and I'm so excited to introduce you to my teammate, my colleague, my friend, Sher Rana. So Cher is a high-performance leadership advisor, speaker, and founder at Inner Space Mindfulness. She's grounded in 2 decades of advising senior leaders at the national level in the Canadian government and 15 years immersed in the world's deepest wisdom traditions. I can't wait to hear about that part. That's just my vote. Sher Rana serves as a bridge between high stakes strategy and inner architecture, turning pressure into calm power. Oof, I love it already. As the creator of the Transcend method, she also delivers an evidence-based system for sustaining high-performance leadership from the inside out, guiding leaders to operate with clarity, presence, and strategic calm. Cher, welcome to the podcast. Finally, we have you in studio, and I can't wait for my audience to plug into you. Welcome to the pod.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. Thanks so much for having me. It's certainly a privilege to be here. I'm deeply appreciative of you having me on. And I love that you introduced us as teammates. We both have a common mission, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
That's right. We are definitely on this mission to change the way the game is being played from the inside out, totally in alignment. But let's just talk a little bit about what conscious leadership means to you before hearing a little bit about what inspired you to join me on this mission.
Absolutely. Yeah, Susan. Well, first of all, I'm so appreciative of the work that you are doing around conscious leadership. And, it's interesting. I've been watching some of your guests come on and kind of, how everyone interprets that. And it's deeply personal. But of course, the common element is, for our leaders, and this is so deeply needed right now in our current world, to show up leading from a place of deep awareness,
Mm,
authenticity, presence, and I mean, paramount, leading with their humanity.
mhm,
And for me, that is with a deep sense of compassion, both towards themselves and to those around us. And for me, conscious leadership is really about accessing your full potential, of course, but also something that goes a little bit beyond that. So, that goes beyond self-actualization and more into the realm of self-transcendence.
yes.
Yeah, which is, being part of something beyond ourselves, kind of,
Mhm,
park a bit of the ego aside and really
mhm.
to be on mission to leave this world a little bit better off than when we came.
Yeah, it's all about that collective consciousness. And that
Mhm.
really is why I felt so called and inspired to want to bring my teammates like you in on this mic to talk about this change that we're seeing in the collective consciousness. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But first, let's plug our audience into some of your heroine's journey in terms of where you felt that call first and what inspired you to go on this mission alongside me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I served with the government of Canada for quite a while. And so I've always been called to service. My father was a diplomat, my grandfather, a human rights lawyer. So it's always kind of been in our blood to to serve in the best way that we can. But then, as life happens, in 2015, I had a pretty bad boogie boarding accident and incurred and I think you've had experience with injury as well, my fourth
Mm-hmm.
concussion, a traumatic brain injury that really pulled me out of my game completely, that benched me.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost my cognitive capacity, my capacity for movement, and it was a real, dark night of the soul moment when my neurologist said to me, "This is your new normal, accept it."
Mm-hmm.
Now, it did pull me out of serving in the way I had, but for me, it was also an opportunity to really examine what my mission in this world can be. And so it ended up being a great opportunity for me as I went through rehabilitation and accessed neuroplasticity, which was fairly new at the time, to literally rewire my brain and really reflect on what my deeper purpose is. So during the time of my recovery, I kind of stumbled upon this concept of mindful self-compassion, and that, popped up into my feed, and I really resonated with it. It had themes around working with your inner critic, because as we know, high performers can be very, very hard on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, for some reason, Susan, I was really drawn to this. So I went into the program and it was so transformative for me. It really presented itself, self-compassion, as such a superpower for not only resilience, but learning how to begin again, really be grounded in the present moment. And I think that, accessing these tools at that time in 2015 literally saved my life at the time, in many
Mm-hmm.
ways. And so that's kind of what initially brought me here. And then, of course, there were many life struggles afterwards, illness, loss, as we all experience at some point or another. And it just really reinforced the really the how should I say this? The power of going inwards for conscious leadership to lead with, more clarity and calm, a sense of ease and personal fulfillment, but also making a massive impact in this world that we live in.
Hmm. I'd love to rewind the game tape on your story just a little bit because you threw
Sure.
on the mat this term around the dark night of the soul, and I'm just curious how many
Mm.
of my leaders listening have heard of that or recognize that terminology. And then you're telling this whole story about how the call to consciousness began with this
Mhm.
curiosity around compassion. And I kind of feel like I see where the link is between those two, but I would love for you to
Mm.
just help bring us into that part of the story. What does that mean to you, the dark night of the soul?
Absolutely. Well, this is, something that it was a term that I hadn't heard of myself until I experienced it, which was for me, it was, really hitting rock bottom in a way that I could never have imagined before. It was a complete loss of my identity, actually, because
Mm-hmm.
I had really attached my identity to this kind of high-flying leadership role that I had, and
Mm-hmm.
having my impact in the world through my work, and that
Mm-hmm.
was stripped away from me.
Mm-hmm.
Who was I without my cognitive capacity, without my, kind of high-flying leadership role?
Mm-hmm.
And what would that mean? Because, in a sense, you're stripped from title, you're stripped from, what is conventionally called status, and you're
Mm-hmm.
really, put on the sidelines, right? So it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was
Very disruptive.
extremely disruptive.
By design, I believe, and I think you
Absolutely,
believe too. But
absolutely. I think, someone said to me, how many times do you have to get hit on the head to get the message that you're meant to receive?
mine was more than I would like to admit on this show right now.
Took me
No, but
four head injuries.
oh my goodness, it's
Yeah.
so the high achievers experience though, and that's why I'm so
Yeah.
deeply curious about that aspect of your story because in all the interviews that I've done with high achieving leaders, that's always the entry point
Hmm.
to self-authorization and then self-actualization and then what we're talking about today, right? Which is getting back and then starting to actually contribute that to the collective experience.
Absolutely. You kind of, go on your hero's or heroine's journey,
Mm-hmm.
where you experience some sort of deep suffering,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully learn some lessons through that,
Mm-hmm.
experience real transformation, internal transformation. And
Mm-hmm.
through that process, it's really, removing the layers of conditioning
Mm-hmm.
around what it means to be successful, what it means to achieve, what high performance
Mm-hmm.
really is, and
Mm-hmm.
really re-examine what that's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And come back and share your experience with others, leaders in particular, to, really just essentially ease the suffering. That's what one very high ranked leader said to me, Cher, just come in and help us to ease the suffering that's going on,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so does that,
Yeah, and that's the lesson. It is around suffering. And I remember hearing
mhm,
that suffering was a choice from some Buddhist monk somewhere along my way in my investigations in terms of some of these old school
yeah,
traditions that we're going to
yeah,
dig into a little bit more today. But yeah, suffering is a choice because suffering comes from attachment. And
yeah.
that's what we're talking about here that leaders struggle with so much is that
Mhm.
forever, right? To be a leader meant to have power over. And that meant that we were actually able to get, the validation that we needed as a supplement for our self-worth. I mean, that's the through line in the hero's journey of any high achiever that I've ever served, right? But yeah, and then we were just talking a second ago off mic about this whole concept of grief, and you referenced that in your story. That was the journey you had to go on, right? In and around, what do you say, four concussions, four uh,
Absolutely.
bad head injuries. But that's what that's trying to get through to you, is that awakening in and around our relationship to ourself, and especially through the filter of compassion, yeah, really starting to understand the truth of who we really are so we can let go of these attachments to, these roles that we play and all these things that we do, quote unquote, as high achievers to seek that validation from the world, right? Because we're trying to get our power back from the world. Isn't that the point of becoming an adult after all, is to go through that gauntlet so you can learn how to practice surrender, so you can learn how to process the grief that comes from surrendering the attachment to the roles that we play. Do you identify with that based on what your lived experience taught you and all those lessons?
Well, yes and no, to a certain extent. Absolutely. I mean, we're so defined by our roles and our
Mm-hmm.
identity, and it takes up a lot of space. And I think you referenced also how we kind of cling to, to how we define ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that creates a lot of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
internal. And but I think we shouldn't have to go through that level of suffering, to reach the kind of um, to reach a higher state of conscious leadership. That's the whole
Mm-hmm.
idea. So
Let's talk about it.
I think us teachers, most of us, I mean, this is the big kind of joke amongst the meditation community is,
Mm-hmm.
what happened to you that you're here? What kind of
Mm-hmm.
suffering did you go through that,
Mm-hmm.
compelled you to get so deeply in this world? And there's, as you said, invariably there's a story of some deep, deep suffering that brings us into this work, into this
Mm-hmm.
inner journey, inner
Yeah.
adventure. But I think really, and around pain, I think around suffering rather, I think pain is inevitable, but suffering is not. We'll all
Mm-hmm.
experience pain, but the suffering that comes with it, which is that like kind of prolonged
Mm-hmm.
um, feeling of difficulty and anguish and feeling like you're not serving at your highest level, especially for highest achievers who are so driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we can learn these skills
Mm-hmm.
without having to go through the some deep suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would personally like to see this really integrated more into any leadership development training,
Mm-hmm.
and even in our educational system.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree there.
In our, it's interesting that in private schools, they do start doing this work with students.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to see this kind of democratized across, all levels of schooling, because
Mm-hmm.
these are the skills that are also it's all anchored in awareness. It begins with awareness. Awareness is foundational to
Mm-hmm.
this work that we're doing, and you've mentioned
Mm-hmm.
this many times as well. And especially in the wherever you are in life professionally, we are not taught how to practice this. We are not
Mm-hmm.
taught how to practice awareness, which is, of course, the foundation of, again, of regulating our nervous systems. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I think we all need to be educated, because in the society that we live in, where most of the population, leadership included, are functioning on autopilot. So,
Mm-hmm.
in this really reactive state,
Mm-hmm.
missing the clarity of thinking, nervous
Mm-hmm.
systems are highly activated. And this is perfectly natural, I'm going to say, in the society that we're living in right now, to be experiencing this,
Mm-hmm.
where there's so much disruption, things are moving so fast. We're living
Mm-hmm.
in a way that we're just not designed to adapt to.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
these skills that we're talking about become even more critical to start developing proactively
Mm-hmm.
wherever you are on your leadership journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what's your experience when you try to assert this as a priority on a balance sheet, right? Like
Hmm.
obviously that's the resistance that shows up, right? When you're describing conditions like you just described, right? We're
Yeah.
up against it in terms of the rate of growth, the speed of change. There's a massive call towards adaptation and innovation, and all of this due to AI accelerating our innovative capacities, let's call them. And so, yeah, I'm just curious, when you're trying to get this asserted as an upstream priority, what is the response that you get? Because my experience is that because they're stuck in those sympathetic overdrives and they're convinced that, therefore they're in scarcity and they don't have enough time and therefore need to do things urgently. What's your experience when you try to assert this upstream, though?
Well, that's a great, 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 and very important question. So, I think what I bring into these conversations is that, having worked in those environments, I understand kind of what their experience is.
Mm-hmm.
And, just really fast-paced, high pressure, constant pressure, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
firefighting. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we would get calls from the minister's office at 6 p.m. and something needs to be done that evening. It's always
Mm-hmm.
on. You are always on. And so, one of the biggest resistance to this type of work is, the classic, we don't have time to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't
That's
have
what
time.
that's what I hear the most.
The
Yeah.
most, we don't
We're
have
too
time to
busy.
do this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I think, Susan, it's in my experience, it's been about connecting with the leaders who are starting to understand this.
Mm-hmm.
So, as in particular, the leaders at the top in the C-suite, who are able to maintain extremely high levels of performance under extreme pressure, many of them are doing some form of this work,
Of course.
through
Mm-hmm.
whatever mode. This is kind of people,
That's the secret sauce that
this is
maybe
the
they
secret.
don't talk about and promote,
Exactly.
but
This
it
is
is why their nervous system is so regulated under such high stakes, high pressure, you know?
exactly. And it's so common, whatever the modality they choose, there's many different modalities, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
to access this kind of inner state of what I call calm power.
Mm-hmm.
And, the business case for this is very strong. So, through some of the work that I've done, I've developed some really strong business cases. And, for leaders who are compassionate and,
Mm-hmm.
who support their people, this work is important. And I've been,
Mm-hmm.
fortunate enough to connect with those leaders. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
naturally happens, where the
Mm-hmm.
conversations happen with us. But I'm also going to have to say that, excellent leaders who have that level of curiosity are also open to having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you had
Mm-hmm.
mentioned some of the work that I did with the Apex Leadership Symposium, which is about 800 public service executives.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what we did was develop a mindfulness and compassion stream for their leadership. And the person, I'm going to credit the leader who brought me in to do this work. She had no idea what this was about, but she was so open and curious.
Mm-hmm.
So, and open to learning. And it was such a massive success, and it had,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fantastic. So I think it's, of course, there's resistance in the mainstream, but I think when you have the conversations and present the business case, as you mentioned, I mean, I've done this work with many organizations, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's been my personal experience.
Yeah, that's what I find too,
Mm.
is that it is quite a natural progression with the leaders who are working on their consciousness in terms of their leadership development and training, that
Mhm.
we get to this point where we do want to reach transcendence. That is the call intuitively that we're able to receive because we're so consciously at the helm, right? And then oftentimes that's where
Absolutely.
you want to pay it forward. And that's oftentimes where my leaders, after going through that part of the journey themselves, will want to bring
Yeah.
it to their teams and will want, like, they're at the legacy stage of their leadership impact game, right? And so that really then starts to become an opportunity, right? For
Yeah.
them to be a part of this chance to change the collective consciousness and leadership.
Absolutely, but I think also, I have to state that I think this is the leadership edge going forward, and I
Let's
think
talk about it.
yeah, I really do believe that. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't personally, I can't see how a leader can thrive in the future. Like, this is such a critical
Mm-hmm.
period, as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
that we're going through. And I think the leaders that don't adapt, who don't start integrating conscious leadership into their own way of showing up as leaders, I think they're going to
Mm-hmm.
suffer. They're going to suffer massively as a result because
Mm-hmm.
I believe that it's just not possible to perform at your highest
Mm-hmm.
level in this level of, there's sheer volume and
Mm-hmm.
friction and
Mm-hmm.
disruption
Mm-hmm.
without having some sort of um, methodology that suits you to access your own authenticity, to be able to maintain clarity amongst all of this, to make those decisions, to hold on to your humanity.
Mm-hmm.
AI can never have those skills of humanity, the compassion, the empathy, decision making. I think that's going to become more and more important kind of as
Mm-hmm.
we move into the future now. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we're at a really critical point where this work is more important than ever before.
Yeah, we definitely are seeing a lot of early adopters that are making that case for the collective, right? In terms of, and I think that's what happens in a disruption, as we learned in the pandemic. Like, it really becomes noticeable who knows how to lead through disruption. I mean, that's one of the greatest tests in terms of your leadership capacity, I feel like, right?
Absolutely.
But we also
Mhm.
got to talk about we're mothers. So we're raising this next generation that's coming into the workforce. And so we know intuitively there ain't a chance that they're going to be signing up to fully engage in your mission if you don't have this type of conscious condition, because those are the homes that we're raising them in.
Absolutely. When it comes to, it's interesting because parents will come to me with, issues with their children.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's so tough for kids right now, as we all
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
There's many mental health challenges
Mm-hmm.
globally,
Mm-hmm.
levels of anxiety, depression, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
which are actually very natural responses to the world that we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
These are, the body is trying to keep you safe, sending you signals around fear and
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty. And, kids don't have the skills, which I mentioned before, to self-regulate,
Mm-hmm.
and start developing their emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
But I always say, it begins with the parents.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It begins with what's happening at home. And if you're bringing home those levels of overwhelm and anxiety and exhaustion and fear, then that's going to trickle down to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, part of conscious leadership is, hand in hand, it goes with conscious parenting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and nothing will awaken consciousness faster than seeing your teenagers suffer,
Mm,
right? With any type of
absolutely.
impact, or disruption to their mental health, which again, as parents, we raised children in this pandemic. So we definitely saw what that was like, and our hearts felt that empathy and compassion for them. But yeah, obviously, this is
Absolutely.
again where all of that yields out, is it just makes it so much more important for us to be consciously selective of the types of organizations that we want to be aligned with, right? Because we understand we bring that energy home with us. I want to talk.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about this calm power because it sounds awfully similar to being at the helm consciously to me. But what this is the concept that you obviously work on helping your leaders get to. What is calm power? Can you tell us about that concept?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, for me, I was really trying to define this kind of state of leadership that's very closely aligned with conscious leadership. But for me, calm power is all about leading from a place of clarity, presence, flow, and ease,
Mm,
rather than force, friction, hustling. Um, and it is kind of a state to be in.
mhm, mhm,
So no matter what is going on around us, we are able to really show up fully as our authentic selves, but also um, very open, curious, um, and present for the people around us.
mm. And I
Hmm.
know you had the coolest way to make the case up at Parliament Hill here at our nation's
Mm,
capital, right? Because I agree, like my favorite way to make a business case is to get them in the locker room and have them experiencing that coherence, right? And that group flow that comes from our help, getting them into that calm power at the helm, right? But you want to tell us
absolutely.
a little bit about what inspired you to go for that type of demonstration in such a big way? What was the call
Absolutely.
there?
Absolutely. Well, this was a few years ago now, but at the time, this is when I was thinking about what my greater service in this world should be when I couldn't go back to my government job due to my,
Mm-hmm,
neurological
mm-hmm,
rewiring that was taking
mm-hmm,
place,
mm-hmm.
that was in progress.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what's important to me? What's always been important to me? This is where it's an opportunity again to
Mm-hmm.
think about what's possible for you when one door closes. Okay, well,
Mm,
what's possible going forward for me beginning again? And for me, always, this concept of it sounds a little hippy dippy, but world peace has always been
heck
really
yeah.
important to me. Just as a
Mm-hmm.
child, you go back to, well, what did I love as a child? And I wanted to be in protests and I wanted to, I
Mm,
was really an advocate for peace and I just didn't
yeah.
understand how leadership could be so terrible. How could this be
I
happening
still
in our
don't
world? I still
understand.
don't
I'm
get
with
it,
your little self there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind that, we're seeing so much destruction and it's just,
Unconsciousness.
it's that there's such a lack of consciousness at the most senior levels
Mm.
across global leadership, utmost failure. That's a whole other
That's
podcast,
part
really.
two. Stay
That's
tuned.
part two. Oh my gosh. So it just always
Mm-hmm.
blew my mind. And I said, well, what's Canada doing? Because, we're the most peaceful nation in the
Mm-hmm.
world. We're such a fantastic, we have a strong peacekeeping mission. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
proud of, our country and our role here. And I'm like, but we don't celebrate it. We don't celebrate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of said, well, I had heard about the UN's International Day of Peace, and globally, people really celebrate it. There's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
festivals and
I
events, and
know.
there's
Mm-hmm.
crickets in Canada. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this is something we should really celebrate also as a demonstration to the world. And, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
again, organically, Susan, the universe connected me to the right
Mm-hmm.
people. And there was a member of parliament who's now a minister. She's been a minister for quite a while. I connected with her and she said, Cher, this work is so important. She knew what I was doing around, the inner game, as you say, call it, and,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
conscious leadership calm power. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, it started as a passion project for me, Susan. I said, well, let's just do something on Parliament Hill.
Mm-hmm.
We have yoga on the hill. I said, why don't we do a nice meditation on the International Day of Peace? Let's celebrate peace. And then
Mm-hmm.
it kind of snowballed from there, where this MP really got engaged. She announced it in the House of Commons. And then one of the kind of founding fathers of mindfulness in the West, his name is John Kabat-Zinn. Some people
Mm-hmm.
might be familiar with him.
Mm-hmm.
Some others don't know him. Just again, organically, he came on board as well. And from a Facebook invitation, we went to 2,000 people on Parliament Hill. A
Wow.
Globe and Mail reporter shadowed us. We
Oh,
went into
cool.
Parliament and held a session with MPs from across all, political realms, the full spectrum, and people really came together around that common theme. And it was such a magical event. Think about the best concert you've been to and the energy that's generated by there. And there's a lot of love. And I think the Maharishi effect is real.
Oh,
Because it
definitely.
was just a great
Definitely.
experience. And, that was almost a decade ago, Susan, now, and we might do it
Mhm.
again next year. But the stakes were high then. We thought the stakes were high then for this work, and they
Mhm.
are, off the charts now. Like this work is so important now. And I think, you
Mhm.
know what, it's really interesting because we're seeing such a rise of conscious leadership in the
Mhm.
face of so much unconscious leadership. This
Ooh,
is what
what do you think of that? I am curious because I got my own thoughts in terms of what's going on there.
Oh yeah. Well, we could have a long conversation around this, but I really feel like there's so much contrast, right? So that I'm not sure if you're familiar with a spiritual leader. She ran for government. Sorry, she ran for government she ran for office in the
Hmm.
United States. Her name is Marianne Williamson.
I love her.
Yeah,
Return to
yeah.
Love, the author of.
Return to Love.
Hmm.
And I was actually consulting with a major politician, and she was
Hmm.
one of the advisors.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
that's a really
Nice.
interesting story, but I won't name names. But
Hmm.
Marianne, one of her themes, is that you need to love stronger than the haters hate,
That's it. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So
The frequency thing.
I think we're starting to see that, a new leadership is starting to emerge,
That's right.
this conscious leadership. And we're seeing it
Hmm.
right now across the globe as well.
Hmm.
We're seeing
Hmm.
a rise of a new type of leader, a
Hmm.
conscious leader,
Hmm.
certainly on the political realm. And that's really exciting to me. And
I
I think it's
agree.
because when you see so much insanity happening on the
Hmm.
unconscious side, there's certain people they're going to be called to step up.
That's
They're going to be
it.
called to this work.
Hmm.
And this conscious leadership, calm power, it's a calling. It's a
Hmm.
calling. Like you
Hmm.
will feel it. Something is
Exactly.
off.
Hmm.
You're not serving at your highest level. You're not having the impact that you want to be having. You're
Hmm.
doing all the things. You've taken all the leadership training that's out
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
the missing piece. And
I
I think
agree.
this is really what every leader who is, purpose oriented, and as you
Hmm.
said, many of these, the senior leaders it's legacy time,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I feel that this is the work that just really takes you to the next level.
It really
That
is.
simple. It's that simple.
And it packs the power and potential to change the world when the
Absolutely.
world, some could argue, has never needed it more than it ever does. And I think the last thing I'll say about that is that's what we were talking about a second ago, right? In terms of the pain and the suffering. And do we have to have that to catalyze the consciousness? Oh dear. But you could see right there, whether we're talking about this internally in terms of that experience that awakens that curiosity and that compassion to want to do better. Yeah, that's also how it manifests in the collective as well, right? In terms of our response to all the suffering that we're now, as conscious leaders, so able to tune into and resonate with in our compassion. So I'm more excited than I've ever been to be alive for this moment, because yeah, you can really feel the change. The change is here. Last question for
Absolutely.
you before we let you go today, Cher. What do you want the legacy of all this incredible work you're doing alongside me to raise the collective consciousness in the context of modern day leadership to be?
Oh, Susan, that's a big
I
question. But
know, but I have to ask you before I let you go, Cher, as my
But I think
big
I answered
visionary.
it, I think I answered it at the beginning of our conversation. Really, it's just simply to reduce the level of suffering in this world.
Hmm.
And the ultimate mission is, of course, world peace, because the
Hmm.
more conscious leadership we have, the
Hmm.
more compassion we'll have in this world, the more, it's not a new concept, inner peace to outer peace,
Hmm.
and I think it's something we all want. I think that's our human nature.
Hmm.
And I will leave you on one note because, as I said, most people think that self-actualization is kind of at the top of, Maslow's pyramid. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's self-transcendence, which is all about um, serving something bigger than yourself and
Mm-hmm.
really connecting with that, whatever sector you're in,
Mm-hmm.
across the globe, whatever your level of leadership, just really connect to that and come
Mm-hmm.
bring that into your own personal mission. And know that through the skills that, you teach, Susan, and I teach, that this is absolutely possible to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it can
Mm-hmm.
happen fairly quickly. I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you that from my own experience, my own transformation, and my own lived experience of the work that we do. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So if anybody out there is resonating and wanting to explore what those next steps would look like with you, how would you like everybody to find you, Cher?
Oh, wow. Well, they can certainly send me an email. We can share that, and have a conversation. That's what I prefer. You're also welcome. I have, of course, have a website, sherrana.com. And my social media game has not been the best, but I'm on Instagram at Sher Rana, more on LinkedIn at Sher Rana as well. So, yeah, if you want to share these handles, I'd be delighted to have a conversation with anyone who's resonated with anything that we've been talking about.
Well, I think your social media game is about to get a little bit better as of this conversation. I know so many of our
I think
folks are going
so.
to want to continue it with you on the sideline. So I encourage you all
Thank you
listening
so
to
much.
go out there and find her on her socials. And yeah, we'll leave all of that in the show notes as we always do, just to make it really seamless and easiest for folks. Yeah, I'm so honored to have you in for this conversation
Likewise,
today, Cher. I
Susan. Thank
mean
you
it.
so much. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it's the first of many. And I look forward to, doing maybe some collaboration. And just it's so great to meet you. It really is. And I think one more thing I'll say is that I found you on Instagram and I reached out and said, you're speaking my language. So definitely a
It's
soul
working.
sister. Definitely a soul sister.
It's
So
calling in
excited.
the troops. I honestly, there's nothing I love more right now than having these conscious conversations with the souls that I'm aligning with and in terms of my teammates and colleagues. And so I know that there's definitely purpose to you finding me on Instagram. And for all of you listening today, however you found us, thank you for tuning in and following along this conscious leadership revolution journey. I just think that leaders, especially, both in the home and on the work front, hold such
Mm.
power when, especially, we're calm in our orientation in terms of the energy we bring into both of those environments. We have such an incredible opportunity from a legacy perspective to answer the call that we're all feeling that brought us to the show today. So, thank you with so much gratitude. Our cup runneth over today from Cher and I's hearts to yours. If you're curious to learn anything else about conscious leadership, please head over to the website, elitehighperformance.com, where you can check out all the different conscious leadership development and training that we're doing there today. And also, please, if you feel called, share this episode with a friend, one of your colleagues or teammates, and help us spread this ripple effect when the world needs it more than ever. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.